Prophet Suleiman once was sitting on the bank of a lake deeply engrossed in the beauties of nature around him. Suddenly, the prophet's attention was drawn towards an ant creeping forward with a grain of wheat in its mouth. As it reached near the water, a tortoise came out, opened its mouth, and the ant crept into it. The tortoise, closing its mouth, disappeared under the water. After a while, the tortoise again sprung out of the water and standing on the bank opened its mouth, and the ant came out. But this time it had no grain of wheat in its mouth. The prophet became anxious to know what had been happening underwater. On inquiring, the ant explained that at the bottom of the lake, there was a stone and underneath it there was another ant who was blind. Allah had created it there and because of blindness, it could not move out. I have been appointed by Allah to provide its daily sustenance with the assistance of the tortoise. Prophet Suleiman, in response to his special prayer to Allah, was granted kingdom and was given power over the forces of nature. He was also endowed with knowledge of their language, hence his ability to speak to the ant. Let us ponder over one thing. If a tiny creature like an ant living under a stone at the bottom of a sea is not denied its sustenance, why should man, the noblest of all creatures, ever suspect loss of his sustenance from Almighty Allah? Prophet Suleiman's subjects were of various types and they lived peacefully and cooperatively by his discipline, justice, and good government. Jinns, men, and the birds gathered in groups before him. On their long march out, once they came to a lowly valley of ants. This valley contained huge deposits of invaluable metals like gold, silver, and precious stones. This precious place was guarded by Allah with extraordinary kinds and sizes of ants. On account of this, none could approach the place on foot nor mounted. When the chief of the ants saw the pomp and the glory of the huge army of Suleiman approaching towards it, it sounded the caution to all of its kind in the valley to get into their holes lest they get trampled down and crushed. Prophet Suleiman smiled at the precaution taken by the ants and ordered his companions to wait until the ants went into their holes and to be careful not to cause any harm to the ants when passing through. He prayed to Allah to make him grateful for his favors and to do good deeds that please him and to admit him among his righteous servants. Addressing the chief of the ants, the prophet is reported to have said, "How could my people hurt you and your like as they are floating in the air and don't you know that I am the apostle of Allah and would never act unfairly?" The chief of the ants replied, "O apostle of Allah, my cautioning my flock was not for fear of hurt but to prevent them getting astray and forgetting the glory of Allah after seeing the glory of your army or your pomp and glamour and be tempted by them. That even the humblest creatures of Allah like the ant is endowed with the necessary wisdom to live and protect its life is apparent from this. Besides, one should not be overtaken by the glory of the worldly pomp of the rulers and kings, as to forget the glory of the Creator Allah. That is what the ant teaches us. On the other hand, the prayer of Prophet Suleiman indicates his humility before Almighty Allah who had bestowed upon him control over the forces of nature. That one should utilize God's bounties for righteousness and for good to others is also the lesson we derive. Despite all his possessions and glory as the king ruling over a vast empire and having control over various creatures, Prophet Suleiman used to fast the whole day, weave baskets, and sell them. From the return of his own labor, he used to purchase loaves and eat them sitting along with the poor. In one of his sermons in Najul Balagha, Imam Ali, A.S. exhorts people to ponder over the power of Allah's creation and citing the example of the creation of an ant he says, "Had they pondered over the greatness of his power and the vastness of his bounty, they would have returned to the right path and feared the punishment of the fire. But hearts are sick and eyes are impure. Do they not see the small things he has created? How he strengthened their system and opened for them hearing and sight and made for them bones and skins. Look at the ant with its small body and delicate form. It can hardly be seen in the corner of the eye, nor by the perception of the imagination. How it moves on the earth and leaps at its livelihood. It carries the grain to its hole and deposits it in its place of stay. It collects during the summer for its winter, and during strength for the period of its weakness. Its livelihood is guaranteed.